And I'm joined now by Roger Phillips, who's the Clerk of Tynwald. Mr. Phillips, preparation for Tynwald Day obviously starts a few weeks in advance. What do you have to do?
The preparation for Tynwald Day starts 5 minutes after Tynwald Day, because we check up all the mistakes we made and we remind ourselves perhaps not to make them the next year. We hope that no one notices the mistakes, but we do, because things don't always go to plan. In fact, they always don't go to plan, if I can put it that way. But yes, we have a year of planning, because we have to think about what guests to invite, because it's quite important for the island to project its image abroad. And we have a number of VIP guests, as you know, every year. And this year we've got the Lord Chancellor, Chris Grayling, who is a very important man in the life of the island. And we also have Mark Kermode, who's the patron, one of the patrons of the Year of Culture. So that's really great news for us. And of course, you know that he has very strong family links with the island, as his name suggests, which he treasures. So those are two particularly welcome guests, although they're all welcome, of course, and some of them are old friends and some of them are new friends.
And how is that process achieved? How do you decide who to invite every year?
Well, what we do is we ask around government, we ask members, and we try to take soundings. And the Tynwald Ceremony Arrangements Committee, which is chaired by the President, in conjunction with the Speaker and other people, tries to form a view about who to invite. And this year the theme has been culture, because it's the Year of Culture. In other years it might be commercial links, it might be whatever they choose to emphasise. And invitations go out. Well, there's quite a trawl through the government departments and through the government ministers to see what they might be interested in. And we produce a list.
Lovely to have such a cultural richness this year. I mean, there's so many things happening around, aren't there,
yes,
in
yes.
Untitled, and also the Viking reenactment in Cooley.
Yes,
That's
yes.
something different this year.
Yes, well, in fact, I have to give pay a lot of tribute to Ailish Madrill, who is in charge of the enhancements and who is very capably organising all of these great events for everybody to entertain them. And it does create a sort of very welcome party atmosphere to this. So the National Day is a celebration in every way.
And I mean, you're mainly concerned with the official business of
Well,
Tynwald
yes.
here, aren't you?
I have a bit of a narrow focus today. Yes, that's true.
Very important, though, that someone has their eye on that particular part. Could you talk to us a little bit about the promulgation of the laws and what that means for the island today?
Well, for me personally, one of the moving things about this ceremony is that we've been doing this for 1,000 years, and it goes back to the roots of what makes the Isle of Man a nation and gives us its sense of identity. And we've been following pretty much the same route, although it's modernised, for 1,000 years. And the promulgation comes from the days when people didn't read, and the lawgivers, the deemsters, would tell people what the law was, and they would settle disputes, and the law develops always through generations, and they would be able to remind people that they shouldn't, kill each other, and maybe points of greater detail about land ownership and all that sort of thing. So it's got very deep roots. It's really interesting, and it's, as I expect most of your listeners who are on the island now, if a law isn't promulgated here within 18 months of royal assent, it ceases to have effect. So it's a very serious. What we're looking at today is not just ceremony. It actually has a legal impact, which is very important. And that, along with the petitions of redress, are the two things that are important parts of our ceremony, but which have a legal effect.
And direct links to democracy. I mean, the idea that those laws are read out in Manx and English so that they're accessible to all. There's a significance there, isn't there?
There is. Of course, it's a link with the heritage that the island has with its Manx language, although, of course, to most people, they listen in English, and the Manx is a foreign language to them nowadays. But it is a symbolic demonstration that everybody needs to be included in this particular part of the ceremony. So it's part of the traditional, we would say in modern terms, inclusiveness. I don't think the Vikings expressed themselves quite like that. But they did have a very practical sense of making sure everybody understood what the law was.
Wonderful. And so after the ceremony today, what happens later on this afternoon for everybody?
Well, the guests are taken around the island, and one of the purposes of inviting people here is not just to show them Tynwald Day, but to show them the island and give them a sense of the richness of what we've got here. We constantly have to make compromises about what we'd like to show them and what we don't have time to show them, because there's so much here that is of great interest. But this afternoon the guests are going to go on a tour of the island. Thank goodness it's just beautiful weather for them, and they'll go north. They've been south already. So we're being pretty even-handed here. This evening there's a banquet for them, which is also important because that's an opportunity for a lot of the members to sit down with our guests and get to know them. And once you get to know people, you can do business with them a lot more easily.
Absolutely. And hopefully we'll be seeing Mr. Kermode on the Isle of Man throughout the year of culture, throughout the rest of the year.
I'm very confident that we'll be seeing more of Mr. Kermode, which is good news.
Mr. Phillips, thank you very much and have a lovely Tynwald Day.
Okay, thank you, Annie.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Watch where you're sticking that.
Okay. So I'm joined here with Mr. Donald Gelling, the former Chief Minister. So, Mr. Gelling, just to begin with, take me through some of your past Tynwalds. You've been here under a variety of different guises.
Indeed, I suppose I could say I'm the only one that has been actually in the Guard of Honour, because I was in the RAF, stationed at RAF Derby, and that was in 1960. So that was the first time I was in, if you like, the parade. And then, of course, coming into politics in '86 as a member for Malone Santon, that was when I started climbing the hill. So I think I've been on every layer of the hill, so I'm now coming back down again, you see. I'm not in politics, but I'm captain of the parish of Santon, which is a position I enjoy very much indeed.
Now looking at the field in front of us now, it seems a slightly, not so much low-key, but perhaps a more scaled-back affair this year. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, in many ways it was nice to have, you would say a smaller gathering, in as much as the locals here, we have dignitaries, but when you get the royalty and one thing and another, you get an awful lot of people here, and it does become a little bit impersonal, I suppose. So it is nice to have a low-key one because everybody can relax, because there's no fear of any problems. One would hope anyway. But no, it's a nice day. It's not too hot, nice breeze, so it's ideal for the particular thing we're going to do just now.
And you have attended all the sort of varying weather eventualities.
Indeed.
So, I mean, how much can it make or break a day?
Well, I can remember just two where it really rained. And when I say rain, I can always recall the Roman Catholic priest from St. Mary's in Douglas was sitting on the hill just under the canopy. He wasn't under it and he wasn't out of it. He was right under where it finishes, and the water was pouring on him like a waterfall, and he just sat there absolutely drenched all the way through. But otherwise, it usually is a good day.
No danger of that today, anyway. No. And just finally, I mean, now you're out of politics, some challenges that the current administration are facing. I mean, what's your views as now an outsider looking in?
Well, I think it's a case of the diversification that we've always had in the Isle of Man, and not putting all our eggs in one basket is certainly working out to our advantage now, because we've always been engineering and we've always been agriculture, and we've always had different parts of the economy, not just all bearing on banks and finance. And of course now, since the big crash, that certainly is proving dividends. So no, it's still healthy, we've still got growth, so therefore we're very optimistic that we'll have a good future.
Fantastic, thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Thanks, lad.
When you're ready.
Minister for Economic Development, Lawrence Skelly. It's been quite a turbulent year for the Isle of Man government. So lots of minister shake-ups. How are you feeling today on this, our National Day?
Well, there has. That's government and that's politics. Today really is about tradition, culture, and to reflect upon that. We have here over 1,000 years of history, and we all want to celebrate our unique culture, really. And it's all about being Manx, and it's not just about being Manx born, but it's also about the new Manx. Many people come here to settle, and they enjoy this day too.
So an inclusive time, not just reflecting back on our heritage, but also to the future about what's coming up. I mean, and especially in your new position, you're going to be thinking very much along those lines.
Indeed, yes. These have been difficult times, very difficult period. From a government perspective, we're going through a rebalancing whilst we are trying to protect the vulnerable. My job is actually to grow the economy, and obviously that's just changed this last week in terms of my role. I'm delighted to accept the role, and I'm just looking forward to a good year ahead for the Isle of Man.
And have you jumped in at the deep end? Have you already started working within economic development, or have you just held back till after Tynwald?
I don't think you ever change, really. I did spend 2.5 years there, so I was, even though I was Minister for Infrastructure, for a short time I was helping the economy and working very closely with John Shimmin. And I'd just like to say, it is quite a difficult period because we're going through this adjustment with the loss of John, which was very unexpected.
Change of subject. You're quite a prolific social media user, aren't you? I mean, how has that been for you? I mean, how have your constituents kind of reacted to that?
Well, the feedback has been quite positive, actually, and I think the interaction sort of speaks for itself. But when I go out and about and people say, I know you've been doing such and such, that tells me they're observing, but they're not always contributing. And social media is just about trying to connect with another audience. We're very accessible, I think, here politically, so whether you're on the email, telephone call, or literally walking down the street, but social media actually connects with a different audience. Usually, if it's not a younger audience, it's a very busy audience. We don't all have the time, and social media gives you that opportunity. So I tend to maintain that level as far as I possibly can.
Also it's really nice personally, it gives me a sense of the busyness of a day of a minister, because I mean it's packed, isn't it? You're in back-to-back meetings on much of the time, right?
Indeed, and it is, and that's what I try and do, is tell the people what I'm actually doing. Try to do a daily tweet, and the tweet is connected to Facebook. I also observe with regards to LinkedIn and so forth, but really people say the question, you spend all your time on social media. I don't. I do one a day, usually one a day, and if there's any other opportunity to promote something, then yes, I think it's well worth it. And you must think also, social media will actually get to an audience beyond the Isle of Man. So a lot of what I do is actually picked up by people off island, and that's very important because that gets Googled and email, picks up the search engines.
Has it been helpful as well to, have you found out some issues yourself that you need to address because of social media?
Funny enough, I get probably, email 10 years ago was the big thing for the last 10 years, but now I get nearly 50% of my messages come through direct messages through social media. So that tells me it is working.
That's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Well, look at the inbox. It's quite significant to say the least. So, but a lot of times it's information and or just very straightforward, simple questions. Not everyone wants to actually ask that question publicly, so that's why I get a lot of private messages as well.
Okay, and I also know you're a big fan of Instagram. You think it's been a great tool to promote the Isle of Man outside of.
We did, and actually when I was in economic development prior, we actually brought some of the most prolific Instagrammers to the Isle of Man, and they, in 2 days, they had some very fortunate weather. They saw the Isle of Man through eyes that we didn't see, and they shared that literally to millions of people. And they say a picture, tells 1,000 stories, and it really does. The Isle of Man, we take it for granted our natural beauty, but here with Instagram, it's a wonderful opportunity to promote that instantly, like the social media says.
So just finally, Mr. Skelly, What are your thoughts when you walk up that path every year? I mean, a moving moment for you?
Always is. And I used to do a job with regards to Tynwald enhancements. I used to arrive here at 7 o'clock in the morning, driving into St. John's, and you see the flags getting closer and closer, and you finally arrive. The hairs on the back of your neck stand to attention by the time you get here. But for me personally now, as what I do as an MHK, when those doors open and I look down there at that hill, it's difficult to put into words the immense pride you feel. But that's pride that I feel, but I hope everyone else does as well.
Mr. Skelly, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
And you too. Happy Tynwald Day.
I'm going to go and get next tripod 6.
Local people may recall that this garden was first established in the year 2000 as a project to mark the millennium. We know that the president of Tynwald feels that this area deserves greater public awareness, and today guests have brought stones from their own countries to lay on a cairn within the gardens. The idea is that this cairn will grow over time as more and more visitors to the gardens add stones to mark their own visits. Another feature introduced in recent years is happening right at this moment. You'll be able to see that, led by the Onken Silver Band and the Manx flag, a party of students from the island's secondary schools is parading towards the field. They will enter the processional pathway at the church Lichgate and continue along the pathway towards Tynwald Hill. Roughly the halfway point, near the entrance to the War Memorial, they will offer compliments to the President of Tynwald, the Honourable CLERK, and to the Minister for Education and Children, the Honourable Tim Crookall, who is the member of the House of Keys for the constituency of Peel. Now, I'm sure that many of you will be aware of the debate in the United Kingdom as to whether 16 and 17-year-olds should be given the right to vote. And Scotland has already introduced this change for the forthcoming referendum on Scottish independence. Well, in the Isle of Man, they have had the vote in all elections since 2006, and it's to be hoped that the young people here today may have their awareness raised to the right that they enjoy at a younger age than their counterparts in much of the United Kingdom. The schools represented today include Ramsey Grammar School, Queen Elizabeth II High School, Castle Rushen High School, St Ninian's High School and Ballacameen High School. Now then, how did you all get here today? Did you come by car or did you use public transport? Well, either way, I suppose it was a fairly easy journey, but that wasn't always the case. In the days before we all had motor cars, Tynwald Day might have been one of the few occasions in the whole year when people, certainly in the country areas, would venture very far away from home. They would make a special effort, possibly coming from miles away on foot. Why? Well, Tynwald Day was recognised as a particularly important day for everyone, but also because they could look forward to meeting people they hadn't seen since the previous year. And I can tell you that even in 2014, that still happens. So why is it so important for so many people? Well, all of us who are here know full well that it sees the annual open-air sitting of the Manx Parliament, the Tynwald Court. As I indicated at the beginning, it's more than 1,000 years old and said to be the oldest continuous parliamentary assembly in the world. Note that I did not say the oldest democratic assembly. In the early days, democratic it was not, but self-appointed. But when the Vikings settled in the island, they brought their own traditional system of Scandinavian assembly with them, both here and to other places as well, and left them all with similar names. But Tynwald here on the Isle of Man is now the only one that survives in its original form. It hasn't always been here at St John's, but this has been the place for several hundred years. St John's was always fairly easy to get to, even on foot, as we're roughly in the centre of the island. Originally, there would have been a king of Man. He was a Viking, but And since then, it's no surprise that there have been lots of changes. At the end of the Viking period, the title King of Man passed to Scotland, when under the Treaty of Perth, Magnus VI, King of Norway, ceded the Isle of Man to Alexander. Later, the title King of Man was held by a succession of the English nobility, among them Thomas, the second Earl of Derby, who famously resigned the regal title King of Man, declaring that it was more honourable to be a great lord than a petty king. So the title became Lord of Man, and so it's remained to this day. And nowadays, in social functions on the Isle of Man, where a loyal toast is observed, it's customary to drink to the Queen, Lord of Man. Of course, these days it's unusual for the Lord of Man to attend Tynwald in person. Last time the Queen did come and preside over the ceremony was in 2003. The first time she'd done so since the millennium of Tynwald in 1979. Nowadays, it's more usual for the Lord of Man to be represented by her Lieutenant Governor. And today, Mr. Adam Wood will preside over his fourth Tynwald ceremony, having been appointed for the customary 5-year term in 2011. As we saw earlier, Tynwald is now widely regarded as the oldest parliamentary assembly in the world. And today, there's only one other that comes close to it. The Parliament in Iceland, called the Althingi, was also established by Viking settlers. And by the way, if you go to Iceland, they will tell you to forget what you were taught at school about America being discovered by Christopher Columbus. Icelanders will tell you that it was really discovered by a Viking called Leif Erikson in the year 1000, and he sailed from Iceland. Over the years, the question has always been, which is the older, Tynwald or the Althingi? Although Iceland claim that theirs is older, the truth is that no one really knows for certain, as over time, exact dates have been lost. What we do know is that the Icelandic open-air assembly was discontinued around 1798, and even that's unclear. So Tynwald is the only survivor in the original form. Incidentally, the Icelandic open-air assembly used to be held at a place called Thingvellir, a very similar word to Tynwald and meaning the same thing, Parliament Field. The site at Iceland is now a national park and a World Heritage Site. Maybe this one should be similarly designated. So, Iceland and the Isle of Man share a lot of history. And it's clear that today's event here is very much a state and parliamentary occasion. And it will all begin very soon at 10:32, very precise. Between now and 10:30, you can see that the various uniformed organisations are taking up their positions on the field and along the sides of the processional pathway. As usual, and befitting the importance of the occasion, there is a military guard of honour, and this year it's the turn of the Royal Air Force. We're delighted to welcome a guard found by the famous Queen's Colour Squadron of the Royal Air Force Regiment, commanded today by Flight Lieutenant David Ford. Our music today is provided by the Band of the Royal Air Force Regiment, directed by its Director of Music, Flying Officer Chris Ianson, assisted by Drum Major Ian Harding. At various times during the ceremony, we shall hear trumpet fanfares, and today we have a fanfare team of 6 who come from the central band of the Royal Air Force, and we shall be able to see them very soon along the low wall adjoining the processional pathway. And they will sound the first fanfare at 10:32 to announce the arrival of His Excellency the Lieutenant Governor.